Welcome and thank you all for joining us today for our online session exploring that frontline volunteer leaders in Asia Pacific are doing to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope you're safe and well in these concerning times. I'm Raida Mana, member of the IAVE team. As the outbreak of coronavirus continues affecting our world, IAVE is committed to help volunteers and volunteer organizations deal with the challenges it presents. We have prepared a series of webinars and resources to help you best respond to this crisis, and that includes today's sessions. As the first to be impacted, the infection rate in many parts of the Asia-Pacific region are now beginning to decline. Today, Flora Chung of the Agency for Volunteer Service in Hong Kong and Lenard Pattiselanno of the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center in Singapore will share some of their practical insights, highlighting how, with the power of volunteering, we can respond with efficiency. A couple of housekeeping announcements as we start. This webinar is being recorded and will be available in our COVID-19 Respond website, that is iave.org/COVID-19. For questions, please type them in the question box and our moderator will convey them to our presenters. I would like to start by introducing our moderator for today's session, Matt Clausen. Matt serves as the North America Regional Representative at IAVE's Board of Directors. He recently completed a 3-year period as president of the Washington office on Latin America, fighting for human rights in Latin America and the US border. Prior to his work at WOLA, he spent 15 years in the senior leadership of Partners of the Americas, a nonprofit organization that brings together people, governments, and local organizations to address challenges in the hemisphere. Throughout his career, Matt has led a number of important initiatives, including President Obama's 100,000 Strong in the Americas Innovation Fund. Thank you, Matt, for leading today's session, and welcome everyone.
Thank you very much, Raida. I'll put on my webcam for just a minute and welcome everybody in whatever time of day it happens to be for you. I don't want to speak longer than a minute or two because the most important thing that we can do today is hear from our presenters who are on the front lines. If we could have the next slide, please. 2 days ago, the UN issued a report, and I'd just like to read a few phrases from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. COVID-19 is the greatest test that we've faced together since the formation of the United Nations. What the world needs now is solidarity. With solidarity, we can defeat the virus and build a better world. Next slide. Everything we do during and after this crisis must be with a strong focus on building more equal, inclusive, and sustainable economies and societies that are more resilient in the face of pandemics, climate change, and the many other global challenges that we face. With the spirit of this webinar and others in this series and so many other opportunities that organizations have been using during this time of crisis to share what's working and what's not, this is really unprecedented in the speed with which things change and how much we all have to learn from each other, both to face this immediate crisis in whatever phase of it we happen to be in, but also to ensure that these lessons go into our bank of knowledge to prepare for and deal with future crises that we may face in our countries, in our regions, or across the world. So I know that webinar recordings like these, while they'll be practically useful for the coming months, will also be an important part of that educational knowledge to be able to harvest what we've learned and make sure that we, like many say, don't waste the opportunity of crisis to be able to prepare for what's to come. So it's an honor to have both Dr. Flora Chung and Lenard Pattiselanno join us today. I will, if we can go to the next slide, just as to introduce Flora first, and then I will introduce Lenard before he presents. Flora Chung has been actively engaged in promoting volunteer services in Hong Kong for over 30 years. She provides leadership and strategic development in managing various volunteer projects and events. Flora is currently a member of the Steering Committee on Promotion of Volunteer Service at the Social Welfare Department of HKSAR, and she's on the Advisory Committee of Applied Social Sciences at Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Flora also serves as the Vice Chairman of the Institute of Social Sciences Development and is the Director of the Guangdong Volunteer Federation. And Flora has been the Secretary General and Vice Chairman of the National Day Organizing Committee of the Welfare Sector for many years, and she's on the front lines right now dealing with working to mobilize volunteers to confront the crisis that is currently before us. Flora, it's a pleasure to have you. Thanks for taking time in your busy day and week to share your experience. Pass the floor to you. It looks like we're having an issue with the audio, if we can stand by.
Hi, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Flora. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for your introduction. I have much pleasure to share my experience in Hong Kong in mobilizing and engaging volunteers to fight the virus. First, I would like to give a bit of the background on COVID-19 outbreak in Hong Kong. And then a little about our safety measures for staff, volunteers, and service recipients. And then comes the core of my presentation, AVS roles. That means the roles of my organization in the Fight Coronavirus Together campaign, the challenges faced and strategies being adopted in response. And finally, I will conclude our learning and insights gained in this crisis. As we call, following COVID-19 cases found in Wuhan since December 2019, there was outbreak in Hong Kong in late January 2020. The Hong Kong government raised the COVID-19 response to the highest level of emergency on January 25th. Till 30 March, 682 cases confirmed, 4 deaths, and 555 cases were still hospitalized or pending for admission. In fact, the confirmed cases shot up to over 700 now. At the early outbreak, there was, I think, probably because of anxiety, fear, and uncertainty, there was panic buying for protective masks, sanitized products, food, daily necessities, etc. The prices are soaring. The underprivileged groups are always the most vulnerable and suffering from lack of proper information, resources, and materials. The knowledge on the virus is inadequate, so there's lots of fake news and messages. The general public is exhausted in taking care of own family members and relatives, can't spare time nor energy to care for other needy people. All school classes suspended until April 2020, subject to further assessment. Close contacts and gatherings are not advised to avoid possible infection. For our organization, ABS, we have taken a number of safety measures First, to protect our staff, volunteers, and service recipients. Amidst the virus outbreak, to minimize the risk of infections, our service centers are closed or shortening opening hours. Our services are partially suspended. Staff has to follow guidelines on control and prevention of virus, to work from home, flexible working hours for those on duty. Staff has to make health declaration, take body temperature every day, and they are provided with face masks, hygienic and sanitizing products at work. As for volunteers, their work or services are also partially suspended. They are provided with infection control guidelines, health tips, both physical and psychological, and masks for service. They also have to take body temperature when entering office and centers. AVS runs an elderly center with over 600 members. At the early outbreak, the center was closed to avoid gathering. We provide the elderly members emotional support via phone calls, send them face masks, hygienic and sanitizing products, deliver limited supplies and care for those singleton or living alone, elderly who are in greater need. Regarding our roles in the fight coronavirus together, we as a volunteer leadership organization in Hong Kong, as our mission tells, we are to play a proactive and pivotal role in the promotion and development of sustainable volunteering for the building of a civil society and caring community. In this very time of crisis, we take roles to elevate the volunteering spirit, call for the community to share and care for the underprivileged through formal or informal volunteering. We provide volunteer opportunities for those who are willing and ready to offer help, facilitate volunteer action with advice and resources. At the very outset of the outbreak, in response to the government's urgent need for support, we recruit volunteers from non-medical and non-professional services to care for people under mandatory home quarantine and support the logistics and quarantine camps. The recruitment was rolled out in early February in a single day of preparation. As of 26 March, more than 116 volunteers signed up. Most are engaged with the packing and distribution of protective supplies for the vulnerable groups. Some assist in procurement and delivery of meals and daily necessities for people under home quarantine, or handle the logistics of the quarantine camps. In fact, the exact duties are to be fixed between the host government department and the volunteers. In the district where our elderly center located, we partner with a volunteer group with medical background to pay caring visits to the singleton elderly, to deliver face masks, sanitizing products, health food, as well as virus protection kits. And to meet the pressing need of the elders living in the public housing estate where one of our service units located, a volunteer group was led to launch a mask raising campaign. During their class suspension, 300 student volunteers were mobilized to appeal for masks through their social media networks, while their volunteer mentors undertook the packing and delivery services. Over 11,000 donated masks were collected, quite a good result, within 5 days for 2,200 elders in the estate. At the territory-wide level, we have successfully secured a funding of around $45,000 from a local charity trust for our antivirus project, which aimed to encourage and facilitate over 100 NGOs and volunteer groups to organize volunteer service to care for 10,000 underprivileged to fight the virus. The recipients include the chronically ill patients, frail elderly, the disabled, new arrivals, ethnic minority groups. With the trust fund, we purchased 50,000 masks and 10,000 hand sanitizers. We also put up public appeals for donation of the protective supplies, hoping to benefit more underprivileged. Until 26 March, more than 15,000 masks and 5,000 hand sanitizers were collected from the community. The NGOs and volunteer groups are invited to apply for antivirus packs for volunteer service. Those packs include masks, hand sanitizers, and antivirus leaflets and caring cards. Health advices in the form of leaflets on virus prevention for members of the public and for volunteers were produced and widely disseminated through social media and the networks of NGOs and volunteer groups. QR code in different languages is available in the leaflets for people of different nations. The children under our family volunteer team are involved to draw caring cards for the underprivileged to express love and care. Our quick response and volunteer initiatives at different levels to fight the virus, in fact, require strong determination and commitment. We do face many challenges and along the road, in fact. First, we face the lack of masks, hygienic and sanitizing products. What we are trying to do is to appeal the public to donate and share. And it proves that it works. In fact, it's a form of volunteerism. Second, we also lack of funding for projects. We are fortunate to be given a grant by Trust Fund, which is designated to fight the virus, by which we can launch a fight the virus campaign project to encourage and stimulate more volunteering in the community. And also, we found almost all donors focus on the need of the underprivileged, but not volunteers. But we are in a position to let them recognize the safety need of volunteers, encourage allocation of protective materials for volunteers in service. And the distribution of resources is another issue. We found it is vital that we partner with NGOs and management of public housing estates to make sure the protective supplies go to the most needed groups. And we have to set criteria for allocation of antivirus packs to the recipient of NGOs or volunteer groups. And this helps to provide the resources to those really in need. There has been also much safety concern on virus infection during the service. So to minimize social interaction, and we need to contact through social media, online, email, or by phone. Supplies to be delivered by post, visit a doorway without entering into the recipient's home. And we also have to limit volunteers to work in small groups. All this helps to minimize the health risks and to protect the safety of the volunteers. We have to We have to avoid gathering of volunteers, provide volunteers protective supplies, briefing and service tips, issue and enforce antivirus guidelines and procedures. Another big challenge is the lack of health insurance for volunteers on possible infections. What we do is to give pre-service infection control advice and service briefing to minimize the risk. And we also have to get volunteers well informed of the risks and respect their free choice. In reality, we're happy that despite the risks and threats, quite a number of volunteers come out willingly to serve. What are the learning and insights we gain in this battle against the virus? We conclude with three keywords. The first C is calm. We have to stay calm while facing the extraordinary challenge. Another C is collaboration. We partner with different organizations, such as NGOs, to identify the needy, healthcare professionals and volunteer groups to serve. Government opens job opportunities. Donors and sponsors give funding and resources. Really, the beauty of volunteerism is to share and care. And the last C is to make change. Quick response to the fast-changing development of the pandemic. Work out to make positive change together with the volunteers. So maybe there is a last C, creative. We should be creative. Yeah. So my final word of my sharing is volunteering is considered very vital to unlock the power of the community. We have to engage volunteers in this very moment of the epidemic. This is all for my sharing. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Flora, for such a clear and concise summary of all that you've been dealing with, and really all of our energies to everything that you and your volunteers and organizations are facing at this time. Thank you for putting this presentation together. As a brief reminder, we are going to take a Q&A session at the end, and feel free to type questions in at any time for either or both presenters. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our second and final presenter for this webinar, Lenard Pattiselanno from Singapore. Lenard joined the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center, NVPC, in July of 2017, where he currently serves as their Director of Outreach and Institutional Partnerships. Over the course of his career, Lenard has come to appreciate the importance of nurturing organizations worthy of people's commitment. He believes in servant leadership and has been involved in several organizational development projects over the years. Before joining NVPC, Lenard was at Sport Singapore, where he had the opportunity to lead various divisions. And prior to that, Lenard served in the Republic of Singapore Navy for 13 years. Lenard graduated from Indiana University in the United States with a Bachelor of Science in Business, and later completed his MBA in 2010 at ESADE in Spain. Lenard, thank you for taking the time to present what your situation is in Singapore. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Matt. Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share. And let me start with this opening slide. And I picked this picture as a reminder and as a mark of respect, as it was taken from our social media post when Singapore had our first COVID-19 deaths. It was a message of encouragement and hope, and I would like to echo that throughout the sharing today. At the bottom, you can see there the line. Sorry, not yet. I'm still on the first slide. Thank you. At the bottom, you can see the first line. At the bottom, we can be the light, in our city of good. And when we talk about a city of good, it is a vision of a Singapore where individuals, organizations, and leaders come together to give their best for others. And giving our best for others means moving away from a me-first mindset and toward being more others-centered. So with that, can I go to the next slide? So I just wanted to provide a simple overview of the sharing today. We're going to look back just a little, and I say a little because it's only been a few weeks. I think we're still dealing with all the changes in the environment. I'll talk a little bit about what we're focusing on right here and right now, and then a little bit about how we are looking forward to the future. Next. So just looking back a little, COVID-19 hit us hard, and sorry for the understatement, but we can already started to see some of the early signs, in the beginning part of the year. As I also work on a team that administers a matching grant to charities that are institutions of a public character. And we were already getting feedback then that many of their fundraising events would have to be postponed or cancelled. So that was going to really hit, their revenue generation and their fundraising abilities. As it continued to evolve, we could see very clearly that volunteer programs were being severely affected. Those that were hardest hit were those with a heavy reliance on large groups of volunteers, smaller charities which didn't have the kind of resource and the kind of networks to continue. And in terms of the segments, certainly the elderly segments such as the migrant workers, these were all very, very hard hit. And of course, we had that whole panic buying episodes, where everything was just taken off the shelves. Next slide. But we had a bit of a mini recovery. We bounced back. Yes, the supermarkets managed to restock everything, and as the messages went out and people heard the stories and people heard the issues, they started to come back. They started to do things. They started to donate, and we were very fortunate as well because we actually saw a spike in donations as well as more volunteers coming forward when the call went out. In February, we raised 2.2 million on the Giving.sg platform. That was 67% or $900,000 more than that was raised in the same period last year. In February, we also saw about 1,000 volunteers registering, and that's a 10% increase from February last year. Next. And then on February 20th, the government launched the SG United portal, which essentially represents Singapore's response to COVID-19. This is a bit of a one-stop portal where you can, volunteer, you can support ongoing community initiatives, you can donate, and you can share stories. And essentially, it provides an easy way for members of the public and for organizations to come together and respond. Next. I'll talk a little bit about what we're focusing on, what NVPC is focusing on right here, right now. If I could provide a little bit of context, NVPC is more of a bridge, between the public sector, the private sector, and the people sector. We are a bit of an intermediary, and we leverage on our networks and the different communities to be able to help each other out. And right now, we're focused on three particular areas of work in the context of COVID-19. Firstly is how we capture hearts and minds. This is a battle of mindshare, a battle of mindsets, and how we continuously emphasize stories of doing good and how do we shift the narrative. The second area is in terms of sector support. How do we strengthen the giver-receiver ecosystem? How do we coordinate with a multitude of stakeholders, including the National Council of Social Services? And how do we bring to bear the resources, the networks, and the power of the different stakeholders, be it corporates, non-profits, and grown-ups? And the third area is in terms of platforms. We believe in the power of a platform-to-platform strategy because it's really a multiplier that can unlock a lot of potential. So you saw earlier SG United, I mentioned the giving.sg platform, and we also have a dashboard that is also consolidating offers and requests for donations in kind, and I'll share a little bit about that in a moment. Next. Okay, so this is the section on how we are capturing hearts and minds. Next. Right, so we have an effort in terms of content creation and how we rallied influencers to do that. I'll just touch on these slides fairly quickly. Next. We also shared stories from the community, highlighting organic acts of good, several posts over a short period of time, covering areas from ground up initiatives, children taking part, and on the right you see food bank volunteers, 80 of them distributing 13,000 kilos of food. Next. As I mentioned, this is really a battle of mindsets and mindshare, and how we're leveraging on the different channels to spread positive messages. And this is some of the content that's on the SG Cares app. Next. And we also talk about how and what is the role for business. Here we have a very nice op-ed in terms of how can crisis unlock a force for good among businesses. And I'll talk a little bit about Company of Good in a moment. And next up, we have the sector support. And next, in terms of the corporates. Right, so this is an initiative under the Company of Good program. Company of Good is our flagship program to empower businesses to give in strategic, sustainable, and impactful ways. And the inspiration, or rather the aspiration, is really goodness is the business of every organization. And because we believe, that we are stronger and better together, the COVID-19 response for Company of Good was around how do we create this platform called Collaborate for Good to catalyze B2B partnerships. So the kind of partnerships that happen are, some examples are a cleaning company that came forth, to offer their services to non-profits because their cleaning requirements had been increased dramatically, and then how other corporates donated money to help fund some of these cleaning services, and how other partners came on board as well to support. So that's an example of how different businesses coming together to make a difference. Next, in terms of the sector support, we also talk about ground up initiatives and how there are different collaborations with community groups, collaborations with other companies as well, other members of the Company of Good to come in and fulfill needs, and again raising or rather recruiting volunteers and directly supporting some ground up initiatives like Be Kind SG, which basically put together a care package, about 7,000 care packages for frontline workers. The next section, I'm just going to mention a little bit about what we're doing in terms of platform work. Next, I mentioned giving.sg earlier. We had created a landing page, for SG United, and the idea was to make it easy for people to find and contribute to COVID-19 responses. On this page, we actually have a range of campaigns to raise funds, as well as volunteer opportunities across various non-profits. So that's one platform. Next. Now this is a new platform that we built. My colleagues literally bootstrapped this in a very short period of time. It is a donation in kind platform that actually is a result of collaboration with multiple stakeholders. We worked with partners in the government, with the different agencies to be able to surface the needs of the charities and the community. We put it up on this platform, and we allowed, basically facilitated matching being done, by members of the public and organizations. So all they had to do was come to this site, take a look at what a charity or a community group needed, click the blue envelope, have a connection, and then decided to just basically find a way to get the in-kind products over to those in need. So we also recognized that there were other organizations that wanted to give things that were not stated as a need. So we also had a section for available offers, so that anyone or more of the charities and the community to come and see, if there's something that they could do with, then they just needed to reach out and allow that to happen. Right. So in the last sort of section of my sharing, and this is the looking forward part, I wanted to raise a question, and that question is really, how do we come out of this stronger? There is a common narrative, across the different stakeholders that we interact with, whether it's from the public sector, the private sector, or the people sectors, and that is, what can we do now to better prepare ourselves for a post-COVID-19 world? One of the areas is upskilling, or focusing on new capabilities, and I would say that new ways of thinking, new ways of doing are going to be critical for us on this journey. And this is a journey, not something that we just want to get out of, but really, how do we come out of it that much better? And in the next couple of slides, I'm just going to share something that is very, very preliminary. It was put together by my CEO, and she wanted to just raise this as a way to discuss and to think about how we are working on things in this COVID-19 period. Could I go to the next slide, please? And this is really, really very early draft, a sneak peek for all of you who are joining in on this webinar. We called it the Lemonade Lab, right? It's a discussion draft. It's about how do we catalyze and prototype future solutions together. And really, Matt mentioned earlier, about how you want to leverage on a crisis. You want to be able to harness all the energy that is in the system to be able to do things better. And the name, Lemonade Lab literally comes from that saying, right? If if life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And the key thing is how do we make it sustainable? How do we do this in a continuous manner? Next slide. So here's a short description. I won't go through it all, but I will just highlight again this essence of social innovation. How when we come together to act for the common good, there are elements of design thinking. There are elements of theory U for those who are familiar with it, and it's really a very rapid way to sense make and try to look at solutions that can be scalable. Next. And how does it work? I won't go through in detail, but I just wanted to give you a flavor, of a couple of questions and a couple of tips in terms of how we could make this work, as we go about, this period. The first point is about how, we are able to sense the data. How do we connect with a range of stakeholders? How do we align on goals and work towards that prototype? Executing and quickly iterating to learn as quickly as possible, and then subsequently, thinking about an immediate to intermediate and subsequently longer-term solutions, and how do we co-evolve that, with our broader stakeholders. So I know it's a bit conceptual and something that you really need to run with. But I know we found it very useful in the way that we've been interacting with the stakeholders in this very, very dynamic situation. Yeah, so that's the end of my presentation. On the last slide, usually we end off with, together let's build a city of good. But I guess in the context of the global volunteering family, I will end off with together let's build cities of good. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Leonard, for that excellent presentation, and particularly for the inspiring framework and motivation that you left us with at the end. And thanks to both you and Flora for staying concise and to the point, which leaves us with a good 15 plus minutes for questions and answers. And so we will unmute both Flora and and Lenard, and do a couple of rounds here. So let me read 3 questions that we have to start and give you each the opportunity to answer any or all of them, and then we'll do another round. We have a question from India about how you manage to get food, vegetables, fruit, and milk. From the United States, we have a question. Thank you for sharing today. I should say in North America, I am experiencing an overload of activity and offerings happening online. Did this happen in your experience? And how relevant is all of this activity now that the crisis is starting to level off? And finally, in this first round, a question for Lenard. Thank you for this wonderful program. How can one join National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center from Nigeria? So let me give you each the chance to cut. Flora, if you'd like to address any or all of those questions, why don't you go first?
Yes, the questions about the food and the necessities to the needed people. I think the government is doing a good job in Hong Kong because the department has provided extra resources to the centers at the neighborhood and in the districts to support those needy people, especially the underprivileged. For example, the singleton elderly, those living alone elders, and the disabled, and the NGOs are given additional resources to support their clients and service recipients. And what we need is to mobilize more, I think, people or such as volunteers to help to deliver or to show their love and concern and care to those people, and also see how we can get those things to their own house. So is that what the questions ask?
Yeah, thank you, Flora. And do you or Lenard, would you like to add anything about how to manage an influx of requests for online activity and offerings?
Hi, Lenard here. I would say what has been helpful for us is the digital platform that really allows for many of these requests and offers to come on and be surfaced and not necessarily overburdening any particular setup or organization, because it becomes a bit of an open marketplace. We do have a small team that tries to make the matching a little bit more efficient. And if we recognize that there's certain offers that may not be exactly what the charity needs, but it's close enough, we'll just put in a call to say, hey, there's something here that that is being offered by a donor. Would you be interested? And then we let sort of natural demand and supply forces take place. But I think the key part here is being able to allow those needs and offers to be surfaced. And again, in sort of a natural demand and supply, if you put up a lot of stuff that nobody wants, after a while, you will take it down. Yeah, that's my comment on the influx of offers and sort of needs. On the other question about joining the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center, I would say just join us on Facebook or LinkedIn, and just follow the stories there. Drop us a note. Happy to connect. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenard and Flora. A few more questions coming in, and a brief note that some people are asking if this recording of this presentation will be available, and slide decks, etc., for those that have arrived late. And the answer is yes, and Rida will tell us how and when you can get those at the end of the conversation. We have several questions related to the challenge of requests for physical distancing versus physical volunteering work. As we grapple with what governments are dictating on physical distancing versus the physical volunteering work that can't be replaced, what would be your advice to get people to step up and out to volunteer? And a related question, from a corporate social responsibility perspective, have you seen good examples of company messaging to staff to encourage physical volunteering? I find this very challenging as the economic downturn has made people worrying about their jobs in addition to their personal safety, and it risks sounding insensitive to rally for corporate physical volunteering to address these NGOs' needs. Would either or both of you like to address that challenge?
In terms of the social distancing, in mobilizing volunteers to help, we also have to cautions that volunteers would not have to get in contact with many people. So their services are mainly through emails, telephone, or online. And if they have to visit people or to pay home visits, we have to divide it into small groups, maybe limited to 2 or 3, and they have to wear masks and put on all those protective equipment. And when they visit people's house, they are not encouraged to enter into the people's house. They just maybe meet at the doorway and then deliver the resources or give advice there. So we have to follow that rule of social distancing in order to control the spread and infection of volunteers. So and before service, we have to provide service briefing and all kinds of advice or tips for volunteers to take care of themselves. Try to avoid contacts and interactions.
Thank you, Flora. Lenard, is there anything you'd like to add related to physical distancing and volunteering challenges?
Yes, thank you very much, Matt. It's very interesting, the challenge that we're facing right now, and many organizations, both on the corporate side and the nonprofit side, have been talking to each other and asking, even asking ourselves as well, how are there any ideas around how we can do this better. At the fairly early stages, where some of the nonprofits recognized that this is going to be an issue, they started to think about how they were able to carry out some of their programs, like befriending, in a very different way. So one of the ideas was to be able to leverage on some basic technology. In this case, it was basically getting a whole bunch of mobile phones, putting it into the hands of the vulnerable or the beneficiaries, and then setting up protocols where the volunteers would call in regularly to check in on them. I had heard a couple of examples where another sort of organization, they had a donor give some sport equipment or exercise equipment, and then small groups of volunteers went down to the beneficiaries to show them how to use some of this equipment while maintaining safe distances, so that they could continue to exercise on their own, because many of the activity centers had been closed. We're also starting to see sort of different types of virtual volunteering taking place. So another organization is trying to organize sort of a call-in remote, like a teleconference, like a video conference, where people could come in and just say hi to the beneficiaries or to sing songs with them. I had actually asked my team if they were prepared to do a virtual karaoke, over a teleconference. And yeah, they're just different ways that we can leverage on technology. Maybe another example that we have also come across is where volunteers could actually coordinate among themselves to be able to deliver certain packages or donations in kind that are being surfaced by the charities, and they don't need to congregate. They just need to coordinate, who's carrying what or who's bringing what, and then just make arrangements to bring that to the beneficiaries, and then maintain all the safe distance protocols. Maybe one last one that I came across as well is a fairly notable foundation was running a volunteer activity to be able to provide hand sanitizers to the public. And when all of these safe distance protocols came in, they had to introduce many sort of practices, such as reducing the number of volunteers who are on shift to the bare minimum, just very small groups, about 10 or so, and then making sure that the way they designed the layout, the way people queued, are lined up, the way the tables and the distribution points were set up were all in full compliance with the safe distance protocols. And just to make it a bit more of an incentive, they asked all the volunteers to take pictures and to show how they were practicing this sort of safe distance practices. And with that evidence, the foundation would pledge 10,000 to a fund in their name for each day of that happening. So it was a bit of a nice challenge to the volunteers to try and uplift their spirits, and at the same time kind of keep to all these protocols. Okay, I might have said too much. Thank you.
Not at all. Thank you, Leonard and Flora. Another small group of questions. Is a general question. Is there anything, knowing what you know now, that you would do differently, and why? A second question from Zay in Ireland. Did you deliver medication to people? And if so, how do you deal with privacy and risks around this? And a third question relates to the challenge of charities who may need to be encouraged to be more creative in fundraising, given that their events are canceled, and what are charities doing, for example, with online fundraising events, etc. If either of you would like to address any or all of those questions, please do.
As according to our experience, we do not advise volunteers to give medications to the service recipients, because except those really, I think, medical care workers, most of the volunteers are doing non-medical work. They are doing logistics to giving care and concern. So it's quite risky to give medications to recipients. Yeah, and as far as the fundraising is concerned, I think during the crisis, I think the most hard hit groups are those underprivileged or the disadvantaged groups, and most donors and the sponsors, they are appealed to support those underprivileged people. So at that crisis period, it's better to appeal support to help those underprivileged, and they do, I think, attract the donations and sponsors support to those people. So I think, for example, in our case, I think we are very successful in raising mass resources from the public or and also the corporate sponsors to give resources. But if they ask to donate for our regular programs, it's not attractive. And even we have to make them aware the need of the volunteers and our workers for those protective equipments. Let them recognize we also have the need of these resources to assist the underprivileged. So I think when we leverage resources, we have to see what are the public or the corporate donors focus on, and then you have to get them involved in that kind of need or issues.
Thank you, Flora. Lenard, is there anything you'd like to add related to either what you would do differently, the issue of medication and privacy, or of fundraising with canceled events?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Knowing what I know now, I would say I would do one thing differently and one thing the same. The thing that I would probably do differently is to really try to have exercised, some of the business continuity plans more robustly. I would say that when it first hit, it took us a little bit of time to really get into the rhythm of operating under BCP type conditions, whether it was working in split teams or subsequently telecommuting. There was a bit of a learning curve, and if having a little bit of that practice and experience, and all the way from the simple things like being able to run a huge virtual meeting, to being able to run some of our programs remotely, I think that would have helped to smoothen or rather accelerate our learning or impact curve. The thing I would do the same is that prior to all of this is to really focus on building community and social capital, because at the point of crisis, that is the time that you are most able to really pick up the phone, drop a note, reach out to a range of networks that would readily come to your aid. And because all of that has been built, over time. And again, it's again, we really have benefited from that. And that is really part of our strategy to really make this a very self-generating type of community and giving ecosystem. On the other question about going creative, in this time of where your fundraising events are being cancelled, we saw some ideas. I actually had a colleague who wrote a very nice sort of a short blog or a short story about a love in the time of COVID, and it had a couple of different ideas, about how we could do things differently, from micro giving, in terms of if you have a neighbor who is on a stay-home notice or in quarantine, help that neighbor out, just by going out and helping to get food for them. But I think in terms of fundraising, one of the ideas was, how do you make certain things, you take advantage of AR or VR and things like that, and you could you have a normal charity golf fundraising event. Could it be a Wii-based golf charity-based event, or even e-gaming or things like that? And you try to tap into the energy of people and what they're doing at home now. There's so in this point of time, there's so many memes and so many crazy videos about how people are coping. How would you leverage on some of that content for fundraising? The other idea is, and I'll share this, that was done by a nonprofit. It wasn't during the time of COVID, but it was a very interesting way to reach out and leverage on influencers. So this particular charity actually partnered up with an events company that was running a beauty pageant. And what they did was they managed to get each of the contestants to leverage their networks to be able to fundraise, and they built a very nice story around what each contestant sense of purpose was, what they believed in, and it was a very nice way to tie in both the objectives of the event as well as the charity. Yeah, so just sharing some ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard and Flora. This is time for the last topic, and I'd like to kind of expand the respondees to include not only Flora and Leonard, but also Raida on behalf of the IAVE Secretariat. There's a number of good questions related to the international volunteering community and how people can help from remotely. The international volunteering, how can the international volunteering community support in other countries? Is there any recommendations related to good web platforms for virtual volunteering? What international donors are there that are supporting nonprofits for the purpose of volunteering? And a really specific question, I think, embodies how people might like to help from Daniel in Denmark, who is offering to help. He just needs an open door. So perhaps to wrap things up, if Flora and Leonard and Raida, if you'd like to respond generally to the question, any of those questions, or just what can we do if we want to help, but maybe we want to help a place of greater need than maybe our local community.
I think IAVE is a very good platform for global organizations, volunteer organizations to share and exchange, and also to learn from each other. And I think if we have, I think, capacity or resources, I think through IAVE as a platform, I think we can also support each other. I think the goal, I think, is the global community is getting smaller. We are very close to each other, so I fully support IAVE to do more to get our organizations closer together, and then to exchange and share with each other.
Hi, Matt.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead, Leonard.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to echo Flora's comments. Just the other day, IAVE had the webinar on the safety and health of volunteers. Had the opportunity to listen in, and it was very insightful, very helpful to really understand the context and the learnings, of the different countries. And if it's outside of your local areas, I think being able to connect with an organization such as IAVE and bring forth knowledge, bring forth experience, that I think is certainly a great way to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. This is Raida here. I mean, part of our mission as an organization is to convene and to generate knowledge around volunteering, and that's what our work with COVID-19 is oriented to. A couple of weeks ago, we launched a global network for organizations working to improve volunteering in their countries and their regions. We are channeling all of the efforts to share practices, to share actions and knowledge through this network. Both the presenters here today, both of them have been invited to this network and are active members of our organization. So we will keep doing this, and it's very important for us to hear from organizations that are working in the front lines everywhere in the world. We will continue putting together sessions to explore what other regions are doing. We believe it is very important to learn from all of the perspectives. And as we collect all of these, we will keep uploading resources to our COVID-19 response website, iave.org COVID-19. That includes the recording of these sessions and any other opportunities we will develop.
Great. Well, thank you, Raida, Flora, and Leonard, on behalf of all of us and on the community of people who and organizations who are doing their best to make a difference. Thank you for taking time away from the immediate challenges that you're facing to share and reflect on what's working, what's not, what we can do together. It's very meaningful for the current moment, and it will be just as meaningful, if not more, as we look towards the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to share and exchange.